Planning Board is now in session. Good evening, everyone. First item on the agenda is 10 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval, continued public hearing, and 10 Turnpike Road, lower impact development for continued public hearing. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on where we are with this public hearing.
The last time we met on this project was March 11th, at which time the public hearings were continued to this evening. In the interim, we received Fuss and O'Neill review comments on March 22nd on the applicant's second submission of plans dated February 28th, 2019. The comments were forwarded to the applicant team, the Planning Board, Conservation. About a week after that, the engineer submitted some interim information to the town's consultant for some preliminary review, but they did not have a chance to fully submit an actual official revised submission package. So they have supplied me with a request to extend the Planning Board's action deadline and to continue the hearings to the next meeting, which is April 29th, April 29th, 2019. And we have that form here that's been signed by the applicant's team.
And that is the form for a request for an extension and a continuation.
Correct.
So I'll ask the board if there's any questions or comments.
No questions.
Nope. No.
Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we extend the decision timeframe for 10 Turnpike Road for major site plan approval and special permit lower impact development to May 3rd, 2019. As requested by the applicant.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain from the vote.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Okay, we've continued the approval period to May 3rd. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we continue the public hearing for 10 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval and special permit lower impact development to April 29th, 2019 at 7 p.m. and 7:05 p.m.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? I have a discussion item. What we're doing is fine. It's because we want to make sure that we do it right for the town and for the applicant. But as the town planner stated a few minutes ago, the applicant doesn't have all, or hasn't had all the materials presented to the board in time for us to act on them. So here we are. We have a public hearing scheduled for tonight, and we're the only ones here relative to that. So, again, it's okay. We have our meeting anyways, but when people say that it takes so long to get an approval through for site plan with the planning board, if you peel it back a little bit and look at the reasons why these hearings are continued, you'll see that it's not related to the planning board's inability. It's related, especially in this case, to the proponents' incomplete submittals and late submittals. We're fine with working with that, but we just want to make sure that people understand that the reasons why it takes so long to get through site plan. Any more discussion? All in favor? Okay, the public hearing's been continued to the 29th. I'll sign the request form. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item, 154 Turnpike Road, site plan non-compliance. I'll ask the town planner to give us the update on this.
Back on January 28th of this year, the planning board had a discussion item regarding the properties at 144 and 154 Turnpike Road, known as White's Corner, owned by Mr. DePietri. It had been determined that there was a driveway connection made between the two properties, which had been conditioned as prohibited, not to have that connection. So we asked Mr. DePietri to come in and present his side of the story and why that happened. And he was given, and some options were discussed, either do nothing and deal with the building inspector, submit a modification, do temporary types of things. In any case, what happened is that after that meeting, the building commissioner sent him a notice of violation for the driveway connection, giving him 30 days to respond. And Mr. DePietri did respond with a what we feel is a temporary solution in the interim while he begins his process to submit applications for modification to the approved site plans. So at this point, I have some information that was included in this evening's packet, which I'll put up on the screen. And what you see on the screen is an aerial image. I can orient you. If you see where the mouse is, right here is actually 154 Turnpike, which is directly in the intersection corner. Breakneck Hill Road is right here along the lower part of the picture, and this is the parking lot that actually belongs to 144 Turnpike. And at the last meeting, one of the neighbors, Mr. Butler, I believe, had made a suggestion that perhaps some of that parking could be used from 144 to help get the parking off the street, etc., by cordoning this off. This is kind of what this solution shows, and how they would do that would be using these Jersey barriers. And they wouldn't be as far apart as they show here. I believe the building inspector had required them to be 5 feet apart if this was going to be the temporary solution. So I've been in contact with Mr. DePietri and his project manager, Dan Ruiz, and they're actually meeting with me this Thursday to review what's necessary to submit applications for modifications to both approved site plans. So at that meeting, I'll explain the applications they have to submit, the plans, the abutter notifications, and the typical public hearing process. And it will be up to them to submit. I believe the building commissioner gave them 30 days to get going on it, and then we'll be monitoring the whole time, because they have to have public notification, which takes about 3 weeks when you have public hearings. So the goal is to get on most likely the first meeting in May, because our next meeting is April 29th, and following that is May 13th. So I'm anticipating that they'll have applications in for that planning board meeting. So it is moving along, and again, this was what you see on the screen was a solution that was proposed by Mr. DePietri's folks. And that's what I have.
Very good. I see we have some neighbors in the audience, and you can tell when it's a good neighborhood when the neighbors all sit so close together. Yeah. So before we open it up to the neighbors, we'll take a cruise down the table with the planning board. Mr. Mills, any questions, comments?
Well, I'm glad that we're having this conversation going. better than I think we ended it last time. To start off, you know, it's an interesting idea. I have some concerns still about, you know, if the issue was to alleviate the parking, it could still be maybe alleviated first by using the garage. And as a temporary solution, I don't know what the history of this planning board has been, but I would be more inclined to start with putting the barriers along the property line for the current site that was approved, i.e. White's Corner, instead of opening it up to an expansion that we don't know would even get approved yet, if we did a modification. And it might save him a little bit of money because I think he'd only need 2 barriers instead of what might be, I don't know, 12. So if you just put it across where the cars are driving to begin with, before we get into what the possibility of a modification would look like. So that's, without having a discussion, those are my thoughts, and where I sit currently.
Thank you. Mr. Jenks?
Andrew, does that say that you're advocating no additional parking for the White's Corner area?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying before we even get a request for a modification, I think if he got a notice to comply, I don't think that we should be advocating that, okay, until you have the modification, the compliance would be to put Jersey barriers opening up to 49 more spaces in an area that wasn't with the original site plan that got approved. That's what I'm saying. So-
Okay, it seems to me that there are 2 problems, and one is the additional parking that is apparently needed for the White's Corner building, but perhaps the bigger problem is the traffic on the road that is increased considerably by having that illegal connector in there. I assumed in looking at this, although it doesn't really, well, I guess it doesn't show the illegal connector, but it didn't show anything being blocked off there, but I assumed that would be blocked off as part of this. Is that right, Karina? As part of this proposal, he would block off the illegal cut-through that he made there?
No,
It would
this
not.
temporary solution that was on the screen here showing the blue line of Jersey barriers proposed, would mean, and the aerial image that they sent happened to not have the connection
Right.
right here.
Yeah,
So here's where
but it's,
the connection is,
Yeah,
right
okay.
here. So, no, this would still be open, and what it would do is open this parking area to additional parking in the neighboring property, but not allow this other parking from 144 to come through and go to Breakneck Hill.
okay, I understand it now. I was looking at this and thinking that we were looking at that connection was up here, not here. So I see it now.
So
In that case,
it's right here.
yeah, in that case, I would agree with Andrew that I think we need more information to even consider this.
And I just want to say, this was not his modification presentation. This was in response to the letter to make some action to say he's addressing the notice of violation.
Oh, okay.
That was my understanding. That he received the letter and in return, to show responsiveness, provided an idea and contacted the people who sell these barriers and put an order in to get them.
So he's basically saying now that 40-some-odd spaces there will solve the parking problem. How do we know that's right?
I can't say that's what he said. All we got was this image.
Well, that's what he's showing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew.
Mr. Stein?
So we have a property owner who is currently not in compliance with the original approved site plan. And instead of bringing the site into compliance with that original approved site plan, the property owner has provided an image of Jersey barriers in an adjacent parking lot. Am I understanding the situation correctly?
That is where we are right now, with the
Well-
promise of an application for modification.
With what?
With the promise of a modification application coming.
With the promise
Yeah,
of a
because I don't have it in
modification
hand,
coming.
right.
Okay.
But he and the building commissioner are corresponding
Okay.
on this
Well,
email.
so we don't, I mean, a promise is
Right.
not a evidentiary document. There's nothing. So for now, I'm going to back that out of the equation for my own purposes, my own analysis. So we have a property owner that's not in compliance with the site plan. So my recommendation to the property owner would be to bring the site into compliance with the original site plan, or continue to rack up the daily fine and submit the necessary modification application for our review. But this, to me, is, you know, the idea of providing the planning department with an image of Jersey barriers in an adjacent parking lot as some sort of token of, you know, I intend to address this situation is not really a material, in my opinion, it's not a material, it's not a material gesture. I feel that we really should stick to our code and our process and encourage the applicant, the property owner to apply for the modification, you know, the proper way.
Thank you. Mrs. Luttrell?
So these Jersey barriers were being proposed as a temporary solution to bring the property into compliance?
I can't say. I know that this aerial image and the spec for the Jersey barriers was submitted to the building commissioner after this notice of violation had been sent out. Having corresponded with the building commissioner, she indicated that Mr. DePietri, who also backed up what Laurie said, that he would be submitting a modification. I don't know the status of when this would be implemented. I don't believe it's out there right now, but I can't say for sure because I didn't go by today. But this was like a step in the right direction. No, it's not a complete compliant, but it showed action to this letter so that we could keep moving forward. And in doing that, I corresponded with Mr. DePietri and saying, what is your schedule for modification? And he said, we plan to get it in within the 30 days to start the process. Because he asked, do I have to be in compliance in 30 days? He asked of the building commissioner, or do I have to get the application submitted? And the building commissioner and I both agreed that the time frame for a butter notification is it takes about 3 weeks to get that process done. So it was not feasible to say you need to have the modification permits in place in that time frame. So the building commissioner indicated to me that what would happen is she would extend this another 30 days so that we could move forward on it and hopefully get resolution, whether he is informed during that permitting that he has to go back to complying with the original site plans, which is the board's prerogative, I believe, or if the modification is accepted. That would be determined during the modification application process.
So she would give him another 30 days if he had filed for a modification?
Yeah, if there's action going forward, that's what is causing her to say, I will extend it because you're making progress to a solution with the planning board, who has the jurisdiction over the modification. So it was kind of, you know, moving it along in steps, and it was going in the right direction.
Okay. I agree with my colleagues, and I would always also like to say if the modification is to put up Jersey barriers permanently, I would not be in favor of that. They lack in aesthetics.
And just to say, I don't have indication of what is going to be proposed yet, because they haven't submitted a revised site plan. You know, this Thursday is to come in and get the idea of the application and everything that he has to submit as a checklist.
Just hypothetically, if, let's say the planning board unanimously said, we endorse this solution of the Jersey barriers being implemented and the parking lot being naturally annexed, or is that even within our jurisdiction at this point to do this? I'm having a hard time even understanding what the property owner was hoping or seeking in submission of this.
Well, I think at the meeting in January, there was some conveyance that something needed to be done, that he couldn't just leave it like that and then, wait for 6 months. So and I'm just speaking out of opinion here, that maybe this was his way of saying, I'm trying to do something. I was listening to one of the abutters who had suggested that, trying to work in the realm to achieve, so we don't get to like
Okay.
not a detente, whatever you call it, when people don't move forward.
Okay. But the outgrowth of this discussion item and this agenda is probably not going to be an endorsement or approval of the Jersey barriers.
No, this was just a presentation of
Okay.
what I had received from the building commissioner, because this was actually submitted to the building department, and then the follow-up email, but this is what's happening, because, I wanted to find out what was going on with the notice of violation. So this was kind of the update of what would transpire. And again, I don't know how far that went, if it's actually installed or not, if they went forward. The other thing is, Mr. DePietri owns both those properties, but I'm not sure, and this would be for a legal opinion, maybe from his team, not even to do with town council, if you can change, if there's mortgages or whatever, if you can change property lines like that without causing some kind of calling of the loans or whatever, if there's anything in place like that, if you change the deeds, I don't know. But that was another thing that came up, that it may not be so simple just to take a piece of the property like that, just because you own it without some kind of an easement or right of way for the other property. So that was another thing. So I think that a lot of these things would come out in the process when they officially apply for a modification to address the non-compliance. And it is a 30-day notice, but the process takes longer, just by the sheer requirement for abutter notifications.
Yes, Phil.
I would just point out, supporting the Jersey barriers, they could lead certainly to more than an implication of a temporary solution. If we found something we could approve, making it clear that that's temporary and we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't solve problems, or if it causes more problems than it solves, then we'll go back to looking for another solution. That would be an advantage of the temporary barriers, I would think, ugly as they may be. Could make planters out of them.
Well, that's, you could do planters and they could be moved instead of
But,
those
Phil,
things.
I mean, my point was, I think it's premature for us to say that that's a temporary solution when we haven't even gotten a modification and we should be still focused on White's Corner itself. That should be in compliance, and I don't think that we should be looking at expanding it into the other areas yet when there's still parking that can happen under the building if we're trying to solve a parking problem.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I'm not implying that would even work as a temporary solution or as a solution. I was just supporting those poor Jersey barriers that were getting picked on.
I certainly agree with the board and the way that Mr. Mills put it out there. Regardless of who the property owner is, the property owner is bound by the approved site plan. That's what's going to be there and sustained and maintained. Doesn't matter who owns it. And full compliance is to remove the pavers, return the area to grass and plantings, and not allow the cars to cut through. That's full compliance.
And a fence.
So until that happens, the property owner's in non-compliance, and now dealing with the building inspector. Mr. Stein is right. There's absolutely no way that this board should have any indication of accepting this temporary solution. We don't have the authority. Once there's a public hearing and the people have spoken, then we have an application before us to act on and either approve it, disapprove it, or somewhere in between. But in the meantime, our position, the planning board's position is that the sites should be returned to full compliance with the approved site plan. But knowing that we have a commitment to submit an application, then these Jersey barriers are being discussed. I think that's between the building inspector and the property owner. The board's position is full compliance with the approved site plan until there's a formal process to change that. So open it up to the public. Anyone want to speak? No? If you want to, just bring the mic over there, Paul.
All right.
That way the whole neighborhood can speak.
Yes, my name is Paul Dyer, 17 Breakneck Hill Road. First of all, I remember the first meeting when we talked about when I think this suggestion was brought up. It was one part of the whole discussion that caught me off guard. Because if I'm looking at that correctly, are we talking 40 parking spaces being added to White's Corner?
I think 49 is what I counted.
Well, 49 spaces, the original plans for these buildings should have had a square foot to parking space ratio that should be maintained. That should be explored first just to find out, is it legal? Is there extra parking and all that? The second thing, I think what they were looking for was the extra space there for nighttime parking when the restaurants are full. I don't know how you can manage that. It'd have to be a gate or something like that. But I agree with the board. I don't think that this annexing of the parking lot should be looked at this time. The gate, the access way should be closed. I sat there today in my truck and watched cars coming in off of Breakneck Hill Road into that space and back out. Indecision in the parking lot of people trying to pass through to go to Starbucks and get back out. It's just too confusing. Why are we doing this? And then on the way out, at the gate to Breakneck Hill Road, I see a for lease sign. Now, is that for 154 or 144? Is the owner trying to sweeten the pot to try to add that feature of an access on to Breakneck Hill Road to get a lease in the office building? I understand he's here for a profit, but if that's the tactic, he's putting it back on our neighborhood roads. We already have a Starbucks on one end of our neighborhood, a Dunkin' Donuts on the other, and it's a cross-through for everyone that's trying to bypass Route 9. Okay, so I would ask that if the board or whoever, maybe a suggestion, that we look at the parking space ratio to square footage and see if it still stands or if it'd be compliant if any change were made in the first place. Second, I'm just concerned, I'll give it off to someone else, but I'm concerned that we're debating something without an active owner here. And the tactic here is just to fluster everyone, get everyone active on this. 3 meetings, he won't be here. 4th meeting he comes in, half the crew, half the neighborhood will be here. He'll let us talk this out. He should be here. It should be an official process, an official application. Okay, we shouldn't have to do something we did 23 years ago. 23 years ago, the conditions were bad, and we knew something like this would make it worse. The development of Route 9 has built up since that 23 years ago. Has the traffic in the area got any better? It's even worse without opening that access road. So, and the last thing is, when I drive home from Boston, I drive past the reservoir, and I look at that exit of 144 onto Route 9. There's no one parking in that front parking lot anymore. There's fewer cars out there, okay? I don't think I've seen a single car pulling out of that road onto Route 9. But there's plenty of them back on Breakneck Hill Road. So I appreciate your support. I appreciate you understanding what the neighborhood is looking for, but I do agree that I think he should become compliant with the original plans. So thank you.
Hal Case 6 Mount Vickery Road. I'm in full agreement with Mr. Morris on this. I think they should be brought back into compliance. And just simply say now that intersection at certain times of the day is pure chaos. If you try to go down there and either go through the intersection, there are cars coming out of the parking lots. It's just, go down there someday if you don't believe me and see how bad it can be. And I believe it should be taken back into full compliance. And my concern is if we put up a temporary solution, temporary often tends to become permanent. And Mr. Dyer pointed out that we don't even know if that would meet the parking requirements or not, and typically how much is needed. And my other concern is temporary barriers sometimes have a way of moving very, very, very easily. And we go back to the same situation we have right now for the next, until he comes in with a plan. So I believe that really the proponent should come in with a plan, and until then go back to full compliance, and I agree with Mr. Morris, and I appreciate your efforts on this. Thank you very much. Do you want to say something?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I was late. I was coming from work. My name is Summer Forrester, and I live directly across from the plaza at 7 Breakneck Hill Road. And so I'd like to echo the comments and points of view from my neighbors. And I would like to add to that so in addition to supporting the position of compliance, that something to consider as well, and I don't know if this is the forum to bring it up, but to sort of add to the narrative of what's going on. So we have the daycare, which is right next door to where I live. So you have parents dropping off young children, coming in and out, and doing a quick turnaround. As they're going either onto Breakneck Hill Road to the light to then go east or west on Route 9, you have the condition of the road, which is also problematic. So there's a huge bump and a traffic light that's very slow for one side of it. So at this point right now, we've actually timed it. You can get 3 cars. If you're on Breakneck Hill Road, either turning onto Route 9, east or west, 3 cars can get through during one green light. So you have this huge backlog. So you add to that the traffic that's coming with people coming from either, be it Hopkinton or the other surrounding towns, and then you add to that the additional trucks and cars coming in and out from the plaza. To echo Hal's comment, it really is chaos. And as someone who works from home a couple days a week, I sit in my dining room and I just see it playing out. I mean, it's faster getting to and from and walking, just getting around walking on foot than being in a car through that area. In addition to that, I can speak directly to the amount of traffic that's outside of the 9 to 5 business hours. Trucks very late at night, upwards of 1 and 2 in the morning coming in and out, and loud trucks. So whether they're making deliveries for the restaurants, or I'm not sure what it is, but it's quite loud, and you can hear it just with the noise of the trucks backing up into all hours of the night. So I'd like to add that to the commentary for consideration. But the point about the road conditions and the lights, I think, is pertinent to this conversation as well, because it does add to what's happening with the flow of traffic. So I'd like to submit those comments.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Giacalone on 30 Breakneck Hill Road. I have a question about the parking underneath that was approved initially, and does that go along with the number of spaces that were used? And my understanding is that parking underneath isn't being used, and is there any way to encourage that to being used, as opposed to places for storage, because originally it was approved for parking? And, to get some compliance with that may help also.
Very good. Frank Giacalone, 30 Breakneck Hill Road. And one of the things, it's very good that area, the businesses are so successful. There's some great businesses down there, and we can walk to them. But having worked in Boston for many, many years and gone to restaurants in Boston, there's no parking there, and many of them, but there are signs that say extra parking down the street to the left, If you look at that site plan, there's a beautiful walkway that goes from the office building 144 down across. And there's, whether they rent parking off, because those lots are empty after 5 o'clock, and it would be perfect for the restaurant businesses down there to send excess parking to a designated parking area. To me, that's a better solution. And this is written, Mr. Morris is absolutely right. They should follow what was written and in the contract. And if things always change, and that's fine, but go through the right channels. Don't, in the middle of the night, pave a road in between. I mean, that's ridiculous in my opinion. So I think, going with the original plan, thinking out of the box a bit about the parking, sending people, like I said, that's a beautiful walkway they built actually for the office people to walk down and have lunch at some of the nice, places down there. So, I think that should be brought up. The use of the garage spaces also. I mean, the nice thing about restaurant parking is you don't have 100 cars leaving at once. You know, you have small groups of people leaving pretty steadily and coming pretty steadily. So I think something like that has got to be really looked at before we simply allow somebody to pave something in the middle of the night. Okay? All right, anyone else want to talk? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll put this up. Thank you.
Oh, I do want to talk. You're just
Oh,
kidding.
oh.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Dyer, 17 Breakneck. I was here last time as well. I'm not going to repeat everything they said. I just wanted to add, though, that the other day I was, I'd come down Route 9 and take a right onto Breakneck with all that construction. So it's a wider turn to even get onto Breakneck, and there's always almost like that collision of somebody turning right and somebody turning left with whatever those barriers are right at the corner. Also, I have some pictures if you'd like to see at some point, or I can send them to you. But literally, I went to go out at 5:45 p.m. and it took me, I think, three lights at least, and then they are 2 minutes, because I just kept watching the clock, and then to find out too that I could barely get through. We live on the corner, and I was almost back there. So I tried to take a selfie with all the cars behind me, and then it took so long. And then of course the traffic, as I mentioned last time, I'm a walker. Hal's a walker. There's quite a few walkers on that road, and it's really, really getting worse. So, Mr. DePietri, we appreciate all the fireworks and everything that goes on. I feel this is a distraction, what he brought to us today. I was confused with what you were talking about. I'm sorry. I understand it now. But I think that's the plan. It's a distraction, and it's taking away from the original thought is, why are we here? We are here because of the original contract, right? 23 years we've been here. And thank you for all you guys do over those years. So, anyone else? Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Would you like to add?
No.
Oh, no. No. Oh, no.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the comments. This item on the agenda is not a public hearing. It's a discussion item, and that's why we put it on there, so that we could have an updated discussion on what the current status is, and also what's been done since the last time we got together. And quite a few things have been done relative to the the zoning enforcement officer. So my comments about full compliance was to define full compliance. I don't have an opinion either way relative to these Jersey barriers, but until there's a formal presentation to the board, then the only thing that this board can go by is the approved site plans. And unless there's a motion in a different direction, then that's what we would expect the zoning enforcement officer to insist on, is full compliance. But because we're having this promise of an application modification, that process will probably address the number of properly designed spaces for the two buildings. And with that information, we will all be able to make a more informed decision. But until then, we'll continue to put this on the agenda periodically so that we can stay updated. Your feedback to us is very important, because it's not just you all live relatively close to the facility, but that traffic travels for miles, up Breakneck Hill Road, and all through lots of neighborhoods, and they're impacted as well. So if there's nothing else, we'll look forward to, we knew that Mr. DePietri wasn't going to be here tonight, because he didn't have to be. We just wanted to have this discussion. He's welcome to come, but his absence isn't really a problem. We just wanted to have this discussion and stay informed, keep the public informed. Anything else on this? We'll move on to the next item. Thank you. It's another discussion item. Economic Development Commission proposed zoning amendment to the Business Village District. We'll ask the town planner to give us the background on this discussion item. Dave, did you want to come up and, no? We just,
I wasn't expecting to be here this evening, Mr. Chairman.
we'll let the town planner update us, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Okay. Back in the fall of 2018, this proposed bylaw amendment to the Business Village District was presented to the Planning Board by the EDC in hopes to have some action at the annual town meeting. But throughout discussions at that time, there was all kinds of different ideas, whether it was an overlay district or incorporate into the master plan, or really vet the bylaw to see what the changes that the EDC was proposing would have as an impact on all the rest of the bylaw. It's kind of a trickle-down effect. If you change one thing, it affects a whole bunch of the rest of the town code, possibly. So it was my understanding that in November timeframe, the planning board, in discussing with Julie Connolly, Kathy Bartolini, Claire Reynolds at the time, that this may be a part of the master plan update process, that it may be a particular category to be included and addressed at that point. So a memo was written and given to EDC along that lines. And I guess the EDC then had additional meetings, and there were some meeting minutes. And then eventually, I think the EDC established a downtown committee, which is a subcommittee for EDC, to continue with specifically handling the downtown issues, whether it's the zoning or the infrastructure or the land use or the uses in general. And that's the information that we have to date. The reason it's on the agenda tonight is because Mimi Luttrell had asked for some clarification as to what the EDC was doing to move forward with this versus what was discussed at the fall planning board discussions at the time. So there was a little confusion there. So we're here tonight because we wanted to get that clarified.
Thank you. Did you want to go next, Mimi? Sure. Mrs. Luttrell.
Karina did a good job. The reason why I asked for it to be on the agenda, because it was my understanding that we had left this, that it would be handled through the master plan process. And then the EDC's minutes indicated that the planning board had requested that they formalize their documents and that they were working with the planning board to create an adoptable document. And it was also brought up at the master plan committee meeting that the planning board was working on downtown zoning with the EDC. And I just wanted to dispel any appearance that the planning board was acting contrary to its public position somehow behind the scenes. So that was all. I just wanted to clarify that. And, the EDC can do whatever they want. We have no control over them. I just want to make sure that if it's said that the planning board is working with them, that the board actually is. And, anybody on the planning board can speak to anybody, but that doesn't mean that they're speaking for the board unless they're empowered by the board to speak for the board.
So could you, thank you, could you, probably can be done in one sentence, maybe more if you want. Say what you think the Southborough Planning Board's position is relative to the zoning downtown, not the specifics of the zoning, but the board's position relative to working with the Master Plan Committee and working with the EDC. What's your understanding of our position, the board's position?
My understanding is that the downtown zoning and other aspects of the downtown revitalization will be addressed through the master plan update process. And there is an appointee from the EDC on that committee.
So you're saying that, as far as you're concerned, the planning board is, as a board, we have two participants on the master plan committee, you and Andrew, and other than that, the planning board is not working on anything relative to the downtown village business district. Is that your?
That's my understanding.
And I'll ask the board if we agree with that.
I think that's right.
I agree with Mimi.
As do I. So the board's official position is that we're allowing the business village district zoning to be worked on by the master plan committee. And certainly welcome the EDC to work together, both committees to work together so that can develop a product that's agreeable and a team effort. So I'll say that Mr. McKay and I had a conversation last week about this, and there's a little bit more as far as going forward, but I'll let you speak if you'd like, Dave.
Sure.
And welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you all. So there have been, I guess, a series of conversations with individual members of the planning board since the more recent, so I see up on the screen here the planning board's November 29th memo, which of course we did receive. The EDC has had follow-up discussions at its own meetings and also some discussions with individual members of the planning board, some of which I was a party to, some of which I wasn't. And my understanding coming out of those discussions was that there was some, and this is in particular coming out of the more recent downtown workshop that the EDC organized and held, I want to say 2 months ago. I should have the date at my fingertips, but I don't. But you know, coming out of that meeting, there was a fair amount of public involvement and public comment and interest in moving things in the downtown forward. And I didn't hear anybody saying that, well, we should wait for the master plan process in order to do that, in part because we have a master plan already. And that was adopted in 2008. The ZAC, at least as far as the zoning piece, followed from that, but you know, coming from the ZAC, we haven't done a meaningful update to any portion of the zoning bylaw, and the downtown business village is just one piece of that. So coming out of the workshop and coming out of some of those subsequent discussions, my understanding at least was that there was more openness and willingness on the planning board to discuss the possibility of addressing downtown zoning early on. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of this stuff has been studied at great length. There's been a lot of public meetings, both with this board, with the ZAC, with the EDC to begin advancing some of these things. And I personally, I just don't see a compelling reason to wait for the master plan. Now, if the feedback from the master plan was all the work we did in 2008 was wrong and we need to take things in a totally different direction, then that to me is that's a different situation. But I've not heard from anybody that what came out of the 2008 master plan, at least with respect to the downtown business village, you know, has really changed. And I want to highlight just a couple of things that came out of the master plan, because I think they're important for sort of setting the stage of what sort of followed from that. One example, and these are direct quotes from the master plan. One of the most important recommendations to come out of the master plan is the need to ensure that the zoning bylaw is subsequently updated so that the bylaw is consistent with the master plan. Also, to provide more foot traffic and encourage appropriate scale and design in the business village district. Allow mixed-use buildings as of right in the business village district, subject to minimum design and impact standards and site plan approval by the planning board. Establish guidelines for specific villages to include architectural lighting, streetscape design standards, and enhance local character. Another goal, this is in the villages section, reinvigorate Southborough's villages by creating small resident-driven businesses. Provide the types of goods and services that Southborough residents now have to obtain in adjacent communities. So I have nothing, absolutely nothing against the master plan process. In fact, I think it's a good process to go through. But I also think that we need to we have been asked to move forward on implementing some of the lessons from the master plan. And I think, you know, the ZAC, at least for the downtown piece, is perhaps a good place to start. I'll admit, I came to town late in the previous master plan game and in the ZAC process. But to have done all of that work, and so many folks put so much energy into all of that, and a lot of good things came out of that, to do nothing to say that because we want to study it for another 2 years, to me, I just don't find that to be all that compelling. So we were hoping that, and what I thought was going to happen next following the conversation that I had with the chairman late last week or earlier this week, I guess it was late last week, was that the EDC was going to be on the agenda for the 29th, and our subcommittee of the EDC was intending to get together in advance beforehand so that we could kind of present some of these ideas to you in a more kind of cohesive and coherent fashion, along with some, you know, more concrete suggestions on how to move forward. But I found out this morning that this was on your agenda, so I didn't want to sort of just not come and at least, you know, give you some preliminary thoughts. So we would really like to find a way to work with the planning board and the master plan committee to bring forth a proposed zoning amendment. And the zoning is just like one little piece of this, you know, much larger downtown project. But we'd like to find a way to come up with a proposal that all three of us can sort of all support, all three of us meaning the planning board, the master plan committee, and the EDC, to you know, advance that and bring it forward, and you know, if not do it at the coming fall town meeting, you know, as soon thereafter as possible.
That's consistent with the way we left it on the phone, Dave. The 29th is, in my world, a long ways off. And when I went over the agenda with Karina, as I do before every meeting, she told me that this was going to be on the agenda tonight at the request of Mrs. Luttrell, which is, I think, great, because now we're going to do both. Unless the board objects, we'll put it on the agenda on the 29th also, and keep the discussion going. from what I'm hearing is that everyone wants to work together, but there's disagreement as to the sequence and the timing. So, and I think that the public should know that the planning board,
Learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk. I need your permission to help. I can learn to understand you much better if I can get. Sorry.
that was a
It's
computer.
Boston accent, I guess, it throws things off.
It wasn't understanding me?
I'm sorry. I don't even know it was happening. Go on, pretend I'm not here. Please.
So, we need to, we need to make sure that the planning board doesn't go in a different direction than what the master plan committee is working on. So, to me, that's very important. We have two members on the of the planning board on the master plan committee, and it wouldn't be appropriate for the planning board to go off in a different direction in any way conflicting with the way the master plan committee is working while they're working. So at the end of the process, the majority of the board may not agree with what the end product or parts of it. But I think it's most important for the master plan committee to know that the planning board does not intend to do anything that would conflict with their work. So a way through this would be to, as you and I spoke, and I spoke with Mrs. Luttrell about this, was it Friday, Mimi? I think it was Friday morning, Thursday. We, and again, as the chairman of the planning board and planning board members, we don't want to like really stick our nose in or change the direction of the master plan committee. But one way to solve this relative to the timing would be to have the master plan committee look at the downtown village business district zoning and develop an opinion either separately or along with the EDC, and then and do that sooner than later. And if that produces a product that EDC likes, master plan likes, then that may be able to go ahead way before the whole master plan project is finished. And I think that that's one way to get there. Mr. Mills.
I appreciate you coming in, and it's great we're having this discussion. And one thing that just stuck out is you said that you've been asked to, you said something about being asked to bring this forward. I'm curious who's asked. Is it the town? Is it the selectmen? Is it like residents? Is it?
It's residents.
Residents have asked.
We've been asked since the EDC was formed, what are you doing about downtown? And the zoning is one component of that. And we took on this project a little more than a year ago, and I think, honestly, part of the impetus for it was the Main Street project and all that was happening on Main Street. And so, you know, we go through an annual sort of priorities review of the things that we're going to focus on for the coming year and what our goals are, as I believe this board does as well. And because there had been so much discussion about Main Street and the Main Street Working Group and so forth, it seemed like a natural time for us to, you know, begin to focus some time and attention on the downtown. And that was not consistent with the timing of the construction project, but also with what folks had been telling us. And when we did a survey, we got some, you know, nearly 500 responses that kind of confirmed the interest in downtown and the interest in having the town and the EDC specifically try and advance some of those initiatives. And it's not just zoning, admittedly, but it's a lot of different things. It's beautification, it's trails and connectivity, it's
zoning, it's mixed use, it's
You mentioned,
streetscape improvements.
you
and
mentioned
all
the
of
two biggies too, the parking and
Right,
the, and
and
the
infrastructure.
and the wastewater.
Absolutely, yeah.
And your EDC is looking at those as well.
We're trying to be, you know, pretty global about if we want to make the kind of downtown improvements. And I think it's important to talk about the vision just a little bit, so I'll sort of swing back to that. But, you know, working from the vision of the 2008 master plan, and the survey results that we got in response to our survey, along with what everybody else is telling us, which, you know, is pretty consistent. I mean, nobody's looking for, you know, Madison Place with retail on the first floor downtown. This is all really, you know, sort of small scale. But, you know, sort of executing on that vision and looking at the entire picture of all the things that you need to have in place in order to make that happen. And even when you have all those things in place, it's still, you know, it's still subject to somebody bringing a project forward and actually, you know, having a, you know, a viable, you know, model for it. But if we start, you know, putting in place these little pieces, zoning, infrastructure, making sure we have the parking, making sure we have the streetscape improvements that we want, and the common areas that give it sort of a sense of place. And again, not to create some big sort of bustling metropolis, but to, you know, add a level of vitality and activity to the downtown that, that folks are telling us they want, including all of, you know, no, I shouldn't say all, including a lot of the residents who live in the downtown area and have been participating in our workshops, and we've had three of them, I believe, so far.
So, and just one other thing, because when I was at the EDC meeting, I think one piece that people shy away from immediately is when they hear septic, right? And if you could briefly describe the type of septic system that is being considered for downtown, I think that would be helpful.
So I can tell you what we're looking at, but I don't know if it's, I hesitate to even say that we're looking at it, because all we're trying.
Yeah, I know,
we're
but I
not-
mean, I'm not implying that you're looking at
We're
actually
not
putting one in.
proposing any septic or wastewater system for downtown. But I think there's a recognition that some of the existing buildings downtown are, you know, that their existing wastewater systems are not ideal. And that, for example, the corner lot, Mr. Bemis's lot, that, you know, septic was one of the considerations that came up there. I know that septic is a consideration further as you go up Newton Street. So, but so to answer your question, we're not proposing or advocating for any particular wastewater system at all. We are trying to set up a meeting to look at the hydroponic system that they have in Weston, just to become educated on what's out there and how these systems work.
And that's where I was trying to lead you to, is that when, I think typically when people think of wastewater, treatment or, you know, discharge or things like that, you think of the big open containers, whether it's breathing or being shared in the air, where with the meeting that we had, it was echoed that it wasn't that type of system that could be looked at for downtown. It was something underground that you wouldn't see. So that's what I was trying to steer you towards, is that, because I think that's an initial thing that everyone hears, like, oh, you know, you're going to have a big, you know, the big circular 1950s, I don't know what they're called, but.
No,
Yeah.
the one system that that we've learned of, and we haven't even been there yet. Mrs. Bartolini has had some conversations with the folks in Weston, but their wastewater, their hydroponic wastewater system is in a greenhouse. And my understanding is it's not a whole lot bigger than this room, and it from what I've read so far, handles the wastewater for 30 of the local businesses right in downtown Weston, and it was created because a number of the businesses were having septic problems, and all of that. So I just want to emphasize that we're
Right.
just gathering information and learning about some of these systems to see what's possible and what exists. I'm with you, Andrew. The idea of a sort of open wastewater treatment facility, I don't think is something that holds any interest from anyone that I've heard, and certainly not on the EDC. I've heard. So I don't think that's what anybody's looking at.
No, and that's what I was trying to give you a platform to echo that.
Thank you.
But that was something, again, that I think jointly everyone's going to have to promote more, that there are lots of different ways to treat the wastewater going forward than what people might typically think of.
Right.
That's all. Sorry that took so long
That's
on my
wonderful.
part.
Anyone else? Mr. Jenks?
David, a lot of things, you have a lot of things in your bucket for planning for downtown. In my judgment, one of the least important is the zoning. Because it's one of the easiest things to do, you may take the approach, yeah, that's an easy thing to do, let's do it. I look at this document and seems to me there are two things the EDC is suggesting. The only one that's, I was going to say is a significant change, but I don't think it is adding the residential dwelling units, adding that title as an approved use. But then you go on and limit that to X number of units in a building, and how we're ever going to come up with the number is, I'm not at all sure how, are 3 in a building or 4 or 5, who knows? And the other thing you've left open up there is the permitted uses up to some number of, I assume you mean square feet. Maybe you're talking total land uses, or maybe it's building uses. We'd have to get that worked out. And that's in there already at 2,000 square feet. I don't know if you being the EDC, is suggesting 2,000 is not a appropriate number, it's too big, or maybe it's too small. And this is unfortunately typical of a lot of the requests that we get to look at zoning. And it comes from people saying things like, well, you ought to improve the zoning downtown. And nobody really knows what that means. I can't tell you that either of these things is an improvement in the zoning. They're easy changes because they're words. And we could fill in the blanks and say, okay, we changed them. Now, what's that going to do to help develop economically the downtown area? Nobody knows. So there's got to be, I don't think there's any basis or any way of really coming up with a hard answer to those. So it's going to have to be somebody's judgment, maybe. Maybe it's somebody who's worked on a similar plan for another town and says, well, we limited it to 6 residential units in a building. Worked out pretty well, but we don't know that that'll work out well in downtown Southborough. So I look at these things and I say, these aren't important. There's nothing here that I would get worked up over. because if either of those became important, I know we'd get them changed. The ultimate way of getting them changed would be for a developer to come in with a good plan and go to town meeting and say, I got a good plan for downtown, and this is what it's gonna do for Southborough, and this is what it's not gonna do to traffic, and these are the benefits of it, but I need you to put in the zoning code the words residential dwelling units, because that's the only way I'm gonna get it approved for zoning. And if it is a good plan, it's gonna get done.
That's not how it works, Mr. Jenks. You gotta have the zoning in place first. 9 times out of 10, a developer is not gonna bring a project forward on the possibility that they might get a zoning in place.
Okay, let me interrupt you, because I agree with where you're going on that. But the key is, what zoning do you have to have in effect? You don't know, because you don't know what the developer's going to come in and look for. If you put in the zoning, the words as a allowed use, residential dwelling units, that may interest some developers. It may not interest others. So you're guessing with that. And this is the thing that's easy to adjust, easy to make it work for a developer. There are lots of cases where a developer comes to a town and starts talking about a project and goes from there to, if we could get this as the zoning, it would allow that. And those things go both ways. I think you're right, most of the times a developer will look at something and say, the zoning in Southborough is easy. Let's go do the project there. But that doesn't tell you what you're gonna get for a project. So I'm just telling you that as one soon not to be a member of the planning board, there's nothing on here that excites me to work on the zoning. I look at downtown and I see the big problems, and the biggest of which, of course, is the wastewater. You got buildings out to the street, out to the sidewalk line with no space. A lot of constraints. It's old. Get the right plan and maybe someone will sell that building and it'll get torn down with appropriate battles with the Historic Society and wherever that goes. But those are the problems that if we can come up with some ideas and good, even very preliminary plans or thoughts about what to do, to me, that's a lot more important than the zoning. That's just my comment and why I'm not at all excited about trying to change the zoning, because I think we make changes like this and yes, it might be the right change, but no, it may not. We just don't know. So, just my comment.
Mr. Chairman, can I mention a couple of things? So, Mr. Jenks, thank you for your comments. I think you're raising two different issues. So the first issue was the narrow zoning amendment that was brought forward in response to the dispute involving the proposed project at 2 Main Street, right? So this was the whole issue about the non-transient hotel motel. And the EDC supported that project without taking a position as to who was right or who was wrong on the zoning bylaw issue. And one of the pieces of feedback that we heard was, if you're gonna support this project, you should fix the zoning bylaw, because in the view of some people, the reference to non-transient hotel motel, if that's the correct language, in the view of those folks, was not intended to include apartments. And if you want to allow apartments, we all think that mixed use is a good idea, so why not just add apartments or condos or whatever appropriate language to that list of things in the existing bylaw that was, that is allowable by special permit for a mixed-use project. That suggestion came to us, and so we brought it to you folks. And then you folks said, well, it's actually more complicated than that, and so we can't do a simple one-line fix. And that's fine. I'll admit, this was not, this was a suggestion that came to us. We passed it along to you folks as a way to sort of smooth the waters for the dispute that had arisen with respect to the 2 Main Street project. Fully recognizing that coming out of the 2008 master plan and the ZAC process and moving forward, a much broader review of downtown zoning and zoning in general was contemplated. So this was intended to be a narrow fix to address a specific issue with respect to mixed use. Planning board didn't want to go that way, and one of the suggestions that I heard was that you can't just do it that one little fix. You got to look at it more globally, and I don't disagree with that. And I think we have done it more globally. So they're really 2 different issues. One was just a narrow fix coming out of the Peter Bemis project. The second issue is, well, what's the broader zoning revision supposed to look like? And I know you think that is not that important, that it doesn't matter, but the master plan says that it does. And one of the things coming out of the master plan was to fix the zoning bylaw, to update the zoning bylaw, and there were a number of weaknesses identified in the master plan, both in the chapter on zoning and in the chapter on downtown, that said, you gotta fix the zoning for the downtown. The ZAC came up with a proposal. I'm not wedded, and I don't think our committee is wedded to the ZAC proposal for downtown. We can do something entirely different. We can do some blend of what ZAC proposed versus what the existing bylaw proposed. We can do a whole new overlay district for something entirely different. But the proof that we need to fix this problem is in the downtown. When you drive by the downtown and the business owners are saying they want more foot traffic, something identified in the master plan, that we need to improve the vitality and the feel of our downtown business village. The residents are saying the same thing. Even the folks who live there are saying, yes, we want to see more here. And so you got to have the zoning in place first. And even when you get the zoning in place, it doesn't mean that the project will come. But if you don't have the zoning in place for the project, the kinds of projects and improvements that you want, your chances of getting that go down dramatically. And I work this from both sides. I've represented developers in other towns, and I represent probably a half a dozen different municipalities. So I see it from both sides. If you want to get those kinds of improvements, you really do need to have the zoning in place to get there first, because a developer is, unless you've got the rare developer that is just, completely flush with cash, they're not going to take a property under agreement and start, incurring all kinds of soft costs. They're not going to get a bank to underwrite the project if it's, 6 months from now, maybe we can get you to town meeting and then we'll see how it goes. And I'd also disagree with you on that the zoning is the easy piece. I think this shows that the zoning is really hard. You got to get 2/3 at town meeting. And so I think that's a significant hurdle that really does chill, from a zoning perspective, the improvements that folks are telling us they want.
I think you've just made a great argument for doing this through the master plan. I agree.
Mr. Stein?
Mr. McKay,
Good to see you, sir.
I admire your efforts because I think that economic development in this community, which is, in my opinion, fundamentally very preservationist, is a real challenge. And I think that Mr. Jenks just encapsulated the major, the overriding theme at town meeting as to why zoning changes are so difficult. Because people in this town, and I understand you've had individual conversations, or people have come to EDC meetings and voiced the sentiment that they want a revitalized downtown and all these changes. A lot of the residents that I know, and myself included, just fundamentally kind of like the town the way it is. We like it. We don't want to see more traffic. We don't want to see much of anything. We kind of like the trees and the birds and, you know, just a fundamentally preservationist sentiment. So I guess I'm wondering, do you agree with what I just said in any way at all?
To some degree, yes.
Okay.
Where I part company with you is, and I think this is the biggest challenge that that economic development organizations face, particularly in towns like Southborough, is educating folks that you can have both, that you can have a vibrant business community, and more importantly, with respect to the downtown, that you can have a small, thriving business village while also preserving all the things that are great about a town like Southborough. You can have both. And that's where, and one of the reasons why I think economic development is so important, really a couple of things. One of which is, if you bury your head in the sand and you do nothing from an economic development perspective, the kinds of projects that come forward tend to be projects that you don't like all that much. And if they're funded by a proponent who has the dough and the wherewithal to see it through, oftentimes they'll get that kind of a project through that you kind of begrudgingly, you know, have to allow, but isn't really your first choice. From an economic development perspective, what we want to do is let's figure out the stuff that the community as a whole wants in areas that are zoned for commercial use, and let's go out and get you those projects. But the recruitment is like the third step. You got to get all the other pieces in place first, one of which is zoning. I don't want to go out trying to recruit the kinds of projects that folks say they want downtown until I can look somebody in the eye and say, this is a project that we can actually get done because we've got the zoning in place to do it.
Okay, can I stop you right there, though?
Sure.
Because where we're at in this dialogue is getting the zoning passed at town meeting. That, to me, is the hurdle. That's the big challenge, is overcoming what Mr. Jenks was just saying.
So here's how we do it. Yeah, so the way you do that is nobody is taught. I have not heard anybody, and I don't think the EDC would say, oh, we need to have 1 billion by right uses for buildings under, 15,000 square feet so that people can just come in and put in, a big, giant chain drugstores. Nobody is saying anything like that. Well, I think what folks are saying, and at least what I would be advocating for, is you have a very, very, very strict set of design criteria. So you know exactly what the buildings are going to look like before they're ever built. And you include a special permit process for those kinds of projects that are particularly sensitive to make sure that the town, as represented by this board, is satisfied with what comes in. And so, the way you sort of, I think, make that case at town meeting for the zoning amendments is to say, this is what we have, and folks are telling us that they want something better. Here's the vision with some renderings of the kinds of things that would fit within the context of the existing bylaw, but understand you're always going to have the backstop that these projects, whether they're mixed use or whatnot, Under the existing bylaw, it's 2,000 square feet. Under the ZAC bylaw, it was 1,800 square feet. Anything over 1,800 square feet, mixed use or otherwise, had to come in front of the planning board for a special permit. And nobody's saying that having a special permit process in place to make sure that we get the kinds of projects that we want is a bad idea. So I think how you sort of put folks' minds at ease at town meeting is to say, here's the changes, but here's a lot of the things that are going to stay the same.
But wouldn't the path of least resistance be to do it through the master plan?
If you want to wait 3 years, yeah.
I'm just
I
thinking.
guess what I'm not hearing is.
It's going to be the easiest, I mean,
Maybe.
the purest vetting that you could hope for. And just my own opinion, my own feedback to you is it's the path most likely to succeed, because it will be collaboratively vetted, and the product will be, I feel, a more palatable at town meeting than trying to go through what you just said and have it pass. Just based on my experience at town meeting and my knowledge of my fellow residents.
You may be 100% right, and I'm not here suggesting that there's a resistance to working with the master plan committee. The only, smidge of concern, I think from my standpoint and from the EDC, is we don't want it to take forever.
Well, the Main Street's going to get ripped up and redone anyway. How long is that going to take?
A while.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the rush? You might as well go through the master plan process, and we'll come out on the other side of it with a product that at that point should pass fairly easily at town meeting. And I understand 3 years is a long time, but we got a construction site there anyway for the foreseeable future. So
Yeah, I guess if it really is a 3-year window, I mean, the EDC, I'm just a member of the EDC. I'm not the chair anymore, so they'll have to decide, what, if anything, they want to do, and we would like to work with you folks. I guess the only thing I would emphasize is we have a master plan already. And the process of educating town meeting is going to need to happen regardless. And I guess, we've not heard anything from the master plan committee or anybody else that suggests that the existing master plan with respect to the downtown is wrong, or there's some piece of it that needs to be revisited. I think we should revisit it, but we just haven't heard anything like that suggests that, we need to wait for the end of a 3-year process to, advance any piece of this.
Well, I certainly echo Mr. Mills's sentiment that it's great that you showed up here tonight to discuss this. It's a great opportunity for me as a planning board member to have you here to air this stuff out.
Thanks.
So thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. This is a good discussion, and I think the 2008 master plan did talk a lot about Business Village in the downtown, so that will definitely be an early topic of discussion for the master plan committee. And I have a lot more information now to add to that discussion. But just to bring this full circle, the reason that I asked for this to be on the agenda was just that there was an appearance that the planning board had asked the EDC to do a zoning update on the downtown. And I was asked about that by other people and directed to look at your minutes that said the planning board was asking the EDC for zoning. And it was my understanding that the planning board had not, as a board, had not asked, in that our formal position was that it would be addressed through the master plan committee.
Mimi, do you know, you've had how many master plan meetings?
2.
So only 2, which is good. It's 2 more than we had before. Do you know if the process of updating the master plan, is it going to be by geography, like by neighborhoods or by sections of the town or zones in the town? Or is it going to be by activities like traffic or open space or recreation? Do you know if you're going to, how you're going to approach all of those elements? Because I heard you say that the downtown or the business village district right now is 4 districts, one size fits all. Do you intend to address that earlier in the process?
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mills.
As a member of the new master plan group, I would say we're still in the process of scoping that out, the actual approach. We spent a lot of time at the last meeting discussing those next steps and deciding, what actually, I think Mr. Stivers, who's here tonight, made a great point the first meeting. He's like, all that's required of us technically would be to do a 1-page update or a couple-page update, add it to the master plan and say, okay, we're done.
Change the date.
Right. And I'd say that there was a great consensus that is not what the master plan committee feels would be the right thing to do. And we are in the process of scoping out exactly, okay, where do we fall between, yes, there needs to be an amendment to say, hey, this is what we looked at, but does it say, hey, the last one was complete trash, we throw it all away? Or is it, we see that it's still in alignment with 2008, what actually got approved, what changes got implemented, we take those out, and we adjust it, but take a broader approach. We are talking about doing, there's been discussions, it's not finalized, but having the similar type roundtables that we had in 2008, where we could break it into those groupings. We haven't gotten to the point of the groupings that would be at each table for discussion items and concentration and focus. But I know personally, I am a huge advocate of that, and I've heard others feel strongly that should occur too. But we haven't made a vote on that. Does that give you some clarity?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that good, maybe?
You should be chair, Andrew.
So it's possible, with what we know right now and what the feelings are between the EDC and the master plan, which is we all want to work together, it's possible then that a zoning revision draft bylaw endorsed by the master plan committee and the EDC and the planning board and the selectmen and whoever else could occur before the end of the master plan update.
Yeah, I think that's true. Before the plan is, completely rewritten and everything, I think we would have an idea of where the master plan committee was headed as far as the downtown. I think that's true.
But as Mr. Stein said half hour ago, if you don't have the support, if a bylaw is being proposed at town meeting that needs 2/3, if you don't have the master plan committee, the EDC, planning board, selectmen, all in support of that article, it's probably not going to pass. Those are the ingredients that get you there. So how that gets done, we're hearing that there's a willingness to work together. So if there's a sensitivity to making that a priority or a reason why it's not, then maybe that's the way forward, at least in the next few months. Mr. Mills?
Yeah, and I think, you know, just the way I see the number of items that came out from our last meeting at the master plan committee meeting, and how many items were planning board or zoning and type related, that it would be, it's not really feasible that we wouldn't come out with having a very focused discussion around that and what was already there and what the EDC is, you know, advocating today and what was in the plan before, that's all gonna get reviewed again, because that was a big piece of the master plan. So I think we are gonna definitely get there, and I'm gonna advocate, if, you know, we're not leading that way, that we do, because I think that, you know, I was the one, I think, who advocated that this should be part of the master plan work, so that it didn't appear that it was a special interest project that was getting rushed through town meeting. So I think, you know, and Jesse was saying, and Phil, I think this whole process, and you too, Mr. Chairman, in terms of when we're done, we should have something that we all agree upon that can go to the town and say, we need to push this through. So, does that make sense?
Dave, for a person who didn't intend to come to this meeting tonight, I think you're in the Hall of Fame for the most prepared person who didn't plan to attend something.
It's an occupational hazard, Mr. Chairman.
So if it's okay with the board, I mean, this is probably going to be on every one of our agendas going forward, some type of a discussion on the progress, hopefully the progress of the master plan, not just relative to downtown, but, you know, the whole thing. It'll be on our agendas into the future. So unless there's an objection, I would suggest we put this on our April 29th agenda. And as we get closer to that date, Dave, if you are able to provide, you know, more detail as to what the discussion would be, then we'll take it on.
And you're always welcome to the master plan committee meetings too, where we love another chef in the kitchen.
You're trying to land me in divorce court, Mr. Mills.
I'm sorry. I just don't, I want you to feel welcome, that's
I
all.
appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, one thing that was mentioned at the EDC meeting last week on Friday was the possibility of a joint meeting between the EDC and the planning board on the 29th to follow up this discussion. Do you have an opinion on to whether that's a possibility, or should we just bring a couple members of the EDC?
What's that agenda look like?
I think folks on the EDC had kind of made it a soft hold so that we could do that.
We're going to have public hearings for 10 Turnpike, Ken's Foods modification to site plan, the 144, 154 Turnpike Road site plan non-compliance, public safety building sign application, and then I already had you penciled in as the EDC proposed bylaw amendment as an agenda item. It's a full, there'll be a couple of public hearings in the beginning.
Relatively full compared to what we've been doing over the last year or so. It's not what we used to do in the 80s and the 90s, but it's relatively full. But yeah, however you want to do it, Dave.
Okay. I think that was the prevailing wisdom from the EDC, was to make it a joint meeting. And so maybe if you want to slot us in towards the end after you have your other business, or however, I'll leave it to you to manage your agenda. You just tell us what time you want us there.
We should probably put
you're
it
able
very
to do
close
that.
to the master plan update. We'll just put those together, side by side, at one after the other. Because they'll tie in that way if somebody wants to stay,
Makes sense.
it covers both.
All right.
Very good.
We'll see you on the 29th.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good seeing you all.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Choate Field Lights discussion.
Would you like me to give an introduction? Okay.
Town planner will now give us an update. What
Hi,
the-
Doreen. Thank you for coming on such short notice.
It's my day off, too.
I know. I realize that.
That's okay.
It's a good thing I live in town.
Um,
For now, yeah.
The planning department received a question from abutters to Choate Field at 11 Lotta which is Kate Battles, who's here tonight, and her husband, Kevin. And they had questioned the planning board's ability to act on the condition that said they have 1 year to review the lighting to see if there's any issues, if it's too much or too little. So I responded in providing Kate some feedback, following up with you, sending you an email to let you know that that was a question, and then reviewing the site plan application, the decisions, to see what it was. And in fact, you know, the planning board still has that condition, and it's based on when the Choate fields were completed. When the lighting project was finished was probably close to this time of year last year, maybe May, June timeframe, right? I saw them working out there. So I believe the Battles attended a Recreation Committee meeting, and you provided feedback on some of the procedures for Choate Field and procedures for the fields in general in town. And there were some issues that the Battles had were they were being left on late at night during thunderstorms and incidents like that, and that you folks responded to them amenably, giving them some information on how to address it if that happens again. So because it's a lighting project and it's a condition, that's why it's before the board tonight as a discussion item. So on the screen, I asked the Battles to identify the lights that they felt were of concern to them, which they could see. And if you look on the screen, the two circled lights that are close to Route 85, Porterville Road, that pertain to the larger area of the field, seems to be what's of concern.
So, of concern, what does that mean? Can we get more detail? Are they too bright? Are they not in the right direction? Are they on too long?
That, and maybe Kate, since she's actually, it's my understanding that the two lights that are visible, as if the cutoffs are not effective for that distance. And also Lattisquama is at a higher elevation, which you'd think would help because the cutoff. Is that true, Kate? What you saw from your house? What the issue is?
Yep. Yes, so it's those two lights just shine in pretty directly. Because we're up a bit higher, because with public safety, a lot of trees came down from the public safety project that we were just hoping if they could be tilted slightly or something, then they wouldn't shine directly at us.
So do you want me to respond now?
You're on, Doreen.
Am I on? Okay.
Thanks for
so-
coming on your day off.
Thanks. So we had Mr. Battles come to a Recreation Commission meeting, and it went really well. We floated around a bunch of different ideas. We're looking into a different shield on those lights that comes down a little bit further. We want to make sure that it's also safe to play, especially for the softball players. When they're looking up, you need to see the ball. If we shadow that down, you kind of lose visibility there. So we want to make sure it's safe. I did get some estimates from Musco on a different shield on that light, and I'm waiting for the estimates on what it would cost to install. It's possible we could, when we're installing the Mooney light fields, that we could put the new shields on when the equipment's already in town. That would be really helpful. So I'm not sure when that would happen. Other alternatives are, I'm looking at putting in a camera. You need to have the Wi-Fi, so I need to find access to Wi-Fi in that area so that if nobody's on the field, we can turn the lights off. Mr. Battle's been really helpful with that because he just emails me or texts me, this past season and said, nobody's out there, so I just was able to just turn the lights off. We're looking at also putting up signage involving the police so that if somebody doesn't know to call me or any other number, they can call the police station. We can set up an account on the Musco software they can turn the lights off as well. The other thing we need to do is tighten up with the soccer coaches, because what sometimes happens is we just block the time. If soccer says we need the field from 6 to 10, we just block it. We don't know the detailed schedule that they have. So there needs to be better communication and coordination with the coaches and the person who is responsible for turning the lights off and on for that group, because we set up an account for them to do that. And then it was getting used to those lights and that type of control system. In the past, I'd drive by and at 12 o'clock at night and the lights would still be on. You get to flip the switch and they're done, Now you can just do it from your phone anywhere, and it's really nice accommodation, but I think the coordination needs to be set out better. So we're looking at improving that as well. So we
Can
got
the
a couple of
neighbors have the
options.
key to the phone thing?
We don't want to give it out to too many people because we don't want people taking advantage. So the other thing is, you may have one soccer coach that doesn't show up, but you have another one that's following them. So the field may be empty, and you may think, oh, it's not even being used. Well, in another 30 minutes, somebody might be showing up to play. So, we're going to have that. That's going to happen. It's just going to happen. So.
And you guys have been so great with us,
Mhm.
and I will say, because Kevin did go to the meeting, it was super positive.
Yeah.
Am I not on? Sorry. It's been super positive, and we appreciate. We have just wanted to also know, because we don't want to constantly harass you with emails and all that, just figuring out a process so that we can
Yeah.
make sure it's not coming, that we're trying to bug anybody. We would like it to be efficient as well.
Yeah.
So, and we appreciate you guys have been great.
Yeah, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and I know that it's because the
So-
lights were new.
Yeah.
And we were hoping that you knew that we were just wanted to provide you with productive feedback from somebody who, we were viewing them.
Sure.
And I don't think we would have noticed them, but so many trees came down, so. But thank you.
So are we all set on this one for tonight, as the board, well, have any questions, or are we sufficiently informed? Yes, Mimi?
I'd just say that it's very helpful and that we're getting these processes set because there are lights going up in other neighborhoods. So it's
Exactly.
good to get it squared away
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
So moving forward, it'll be
Yeah, and those
much
lights are a little
smoother.
different than the ones that are out here. They're not as high, and the lamp is different. They're LED lights. I think there's more, yeah, thank you. More downward.
great.
So
Thank
just
you,
so I-
Doreen.
So I'm clear, I know we're almost up on the year time period, but it's gonna take longer than that because of, you're gonna try to coordinate with the lights at Finn or Mooney Field, right?
It
To
might, I mean, if
Put
it,
the shades on and everything, so.
right, I don't know what the costs are, so, I mean, if we can, if it's not outrageous, we might be able to get it done sooner, but if it's exorbitant, we might
Okay,
wanna.
no, I just wanna make sure that, so we're gonna have a follow-up in 6 months?
I think what we're hearing is that the rec department is not going to say, well, the year's up, too bad.
Yeah, no, that's not.
You're committed to making it right.
Oh, absolutely.
So the 1 year thing is, we're all on the same page. We're just gonna move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anything else? You all set, Kate, for now? For now.
For now.
Thanks.
right.
Thanks, Doreen.
Okay, well, good night. I'm going to get dessert now with my family.
Next item on the agenda is master plan update. Oh, sure. Mrs. Luttrell.
Okay, we've already teased some of this. We had our second meeting last Wednesday, at which time we broke into smaller groups and reviewed the 2008 master plan implementation plan, looked at those items to decide whether things have been completed. If not completed, well, whether they were still relevant items that should be part of the next master plan or no longer relevant. And those results are being looked at, and we'll discuss those as a committee our next meeting, which is the 24th. Also, the committee wanted someone from MAPC to come to our next meeting. They had questions on the proposal, so hopefully we'll be able to do that. And also, the committee looked, which is part of your packet, at the potential plan outcomes. There were 3 different outcomes, just to kind of get a feeling for how people were thinking. The first outcome was, change the date. And, the second was more comprehensive, update all the sections. And then the third was to create a community-wide plan that would include the schools and all of the town services. And most of the committee was between 2 and 3, and thought we needed to do more than one, just change the date. So I'd ask the board if they had any feelings on those 3 outcomes of what they're thinking, where we should be going.
I would just agree that number 1 doesn't seem to do much. That should come off your list.
But if after the whole review, everyone on the committee has reviewed the current master plan? They've read it?
That was their homework.
So if after they review it and they find that it still fits, still works, not just saying change the date, but something pretty close to it, that should still be under consideration. Although, if after the homework was done, they feel that there's more work than just a few little changes, then that's where it takes you. But also, as we heard multiple times when we were in the ZAC for 4.5 years, don't fix it if it's not broken. Don't have to rewrite it if it's adequate the way it is. So, sounds like if you're somewhere between 2 and 3, sounds like it's not just going to be it's not going to just be a quickie review. It's going to be very thorough and intended to not just take care of the plan for today, but for another 10 years. Anyone else?
I can just add that I'll be contacting MAPC to see if they can get their project manager to attend to help clarify to the master plan committee, as you guys have requested. And also note that the census is coming up, and some of the sections are dependent on census data. So the MAPC will be able to help identify to what extent, which, the master plan committee may have members who already understand that, but maybe MAPC can help with that part too, and the timing of that.
Well set with that one? Anyone from the public? Anyone at all? No? Next item on the agenda. Thank you very much, Andrew and Mimi, for that. Main Street Reconstruction Project. Karina.
Okay, quickly, let me just get rid of this. Okay, we received an email from Karen Galligan at the DPW at April 1st, which I put up on the screen, and it's an update to the Main Street Reconstruction Project. Would you like me to just read it aloud? All right, and I'll share this. Again, it's from Karen Galligan. Please share the following with your boards or committees, residents, whoever is asking you about the Main Street project. One thing to note is that the project is a state project, not a local project. Details of the schedule are determined by the state and the contractor. Although we will have input and access to information, we will not necessarily have day-to-day information. The information below is an accurate, although unspecific, summary of the work that will be happening this year. People can join the updates page of the website for more specific information as it comes in. And the bullet items are: the Main Street project will begin this April 2019. Work in 2019 will generally consist of tree removal, water main replacement, drainage upgrades, third-party utility work, stone wall work, and some curbing and sidewalk work. The water main replacement work is currently planned to begin on the west end of the project, Sears Road, and move east. Drainage work will likely proceed in the same direction, with the drainage work beginning after the water main work has progressed along the route. Water and drainage work will be happening simultaneously for several weeks throughout the 2019 construction season. Third-party utility work, generally utility pole and wire work, will be performed throughout the construction season and will happen simultaneously with all the other project work. Stone wall relocation and reconstruction will likely begin mid-spring. Some curbing and sidewalk work is planned to begin late summer into the early fall. New pavement should not be expected in 2019. So generally a lot of infrastructure, curbing, water drainage. Typical start of a project.
We wanted to put that on the agenda and read it because it's important, it's big news, and the DPW director was excellent in sending this out and inviting us, the boards, to spread the word. So since there's certain number of people that watch us on TV. We thought be another way to get the word out. Any questions, comments? Okay, move on to the next item, which is discussion, Tree City USA program. Karina.
On April 2nd, the Board of Selectmen approved or proclaimed Arbor Day for April 26th, as you can see on the screen. Following that, we worked on a potential form that we can post on the website where interested participants to the tree planting program could sign up, give their information, if they want to plant a tree on their private property within 20 feet of the right-of-way, which doesn't conflict with underground utilities or above power lines. They could do so by saying, we're interested in doing that, and then they would coordinate with the tree warden. Or they could possibly donate a native species tree to the town, and the tree warden through the DPW would coordinate a location for that, or they could donate funds. So this online form is kind of a starting point with information for the residents that has a link to the DCR and Arbor Day Foundation information on Tree City USA. It also references the town's street tree policy guidelines from January of 2010, which currently Mimi has provided some feedback on to updating that document, and we're still working on that. And I submitted this information to the DPW so she could tell me if there were any things she was concerned with the way the form was set up. And Karen Galligan responded to me. I think I put a copy of this in your packet as well. She had 3 comments saying, could we somehow clarify a few things on the form, that if the participant chooses to plant on their property, the resident is responsible for planting the trees, and that the resident will have total control over maintenance and ultimate removal of the tree. So, because it's on private property, so we'll clarify that in the form if we decide to move forward with that. Number 2 is if the resident donates a tree, it will not be the resident's, the DPW, the tree warden will figure out where it's planted. So they won't have to worry about that. It would just be their intent to participate by donating a tree. And the 3rd is that if a resident donates funds to purchase a tree, that the DPW, in conjunction with the tree warden, would determine the species and where it would go, because they will have a quick idea of and the best idea of where it goes, so it doesn't conflict with, again, overhead power lines or underground utilities. And they do already have areas where they're looking to put trees, and this would fill that gap. So I was hoping that the planning board would have a chance to look at that form and just let me know if there's any other comments you have on it. That way we can proceed with Tom LaFlamme, the IT director, to get this on the website ASAP. And I know that there are some things we're working on to get some kind of a program for Arbor Day, something small but significant so that it stands out.
I would like to make a motion that we give a unanimous round of applause to the chairman for his presentation at town meeting and motivating the selectmen to get this done so quickly.
Second?
You have to say all in favor.
The motion was not voted on.
All in favor?
You bet.
Well, it passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. That form, can we take that as homework if you're fine with it, but I think it just needs a little bit more. One of the concerns, and we talked about this with the DPW director, which was to not put a burden on the DPW for this program, and also make sure that the town, in the form of the DPW or the tree warden, don't kind of work their way onto private property and making the residents feel as though that they don't have the final say. So we have to do a little bit more with that, I think, to protect the property owners. If the tree warden says the tree should be over here and the property owner wants it over there, who has jurisdiction? And I think we don't want to get into that, knowing that if it's private property, you can do what you want, as long as it's safe. So if we can take that as a homework assignment, and maybe, see, today's Monday, so maybe by the end of the week, offer your comments, if any, and then we'll try to wrap it up with DPW, especially related to some of these costs and the burden on the DPW's time. But yeah, it's moving forward, and hopefully on Arbor Day we'll have some type of an event where a tree will be planted or similar. Anything else on yes, Mimi?
So, are the street tree guidelines going to be updated, or?
I'm not sure yet. I have to get with you to talk about understanding the spreadsheet you gave. And
Okay.
just sit with you and go over it a little bit so I can understand it, and then maybe at the, I mean, right now that's the policy that's in place, but I know there's a lot of, not a lot, there's some deficiencies and some things that need to change. I'm not sure where to take that yet, if you have a suggestion.
Yeah. Well, those pear trees are on there. That's a big concern.
Well, we don't own that. The DPW owns that policy, right?
Oh, I thought that came through planning.
No, I think it's the DPW.
Oh, it is, okay.
But I think it would be helpful to have consistency within the town. And I know, like, Open Space has been working on native species, and we've taken that up as a board. And I think those pear trees are a problem. They've been deemed invasive in many areas in the country.
So we could possibly have like a, for this particular program, you know, see tree policy except for blah, 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 if the DPW's on board with that, like a temporary.
Right, I mean, the DPW could say, hands off, we'll take care of it, thanks anyways. Or they may say, yeah, thanks for the help, go for it, and, you know, or I forget the name of the consultant that did that, but it's a local consultant.
I think it was VHB.
VHB. So we may, with our funds this year, hire them to update it, especially if it's already in their computer. So it's a good question, and I guess we'll take it as homework to work with DPW and see which of these options we can do.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good direction. I wasn't sure.
Anything else on Tree City? Okay, next item, site plan procedures, construction phase discussion. Karina?
We've been carrying this discussion item in hopes to get further along the line with it. This all stems back to, we have a process in place for subdivision when they go into construction phase, where we have the town consultant provide inspections, because it's a public roadway in the future, so we have to ensure that. For site plans, it's typically private, it's mostly private property when there are access roads for, like Kane's Crossing or, you know, the 28 Boston Road. Ken's Foods, it's all private. So we don't, since I've been here, I haven't seen any history of inspection during construction phase. So we're still trying to get some feedback on what we should do. There is a condition usually in the site plan approval that allows for funding by the applicant if needed during construction phase, similar to the subdivision decisions. So I need a chance to maybe work on this a little bit more and find out what's best, because there are projects in construction right now, so it's important. Right now, I go out and look at them sometimes. Conservation is looking at them because they have their stormwater management permits. So that's very helpful because they're out there regularly, whereas I get out there when I have a chance, or if there's an abutter question or something like that. So it'd be nice if we could just start thinking about other aspects of that, because part of that is open space. Some of these projects have open space restrictions. And right now, other than the continuing process, we're trying to move forward with the monitoring for baselines for open space. We don't have anything that says, okay, during construction, go out and make sure the open space is being protected. Because by then, if it's too late, it's, then they're already disturbing it. So I guess it's something we're working on right now, or I'm working on, and Mimi's helpful because she answers my questions on this. And if anybody else has any ideas how we could go about this, maybe we can carry it again on the next agenda and just talk about it more till we actually come up with a plan. Meaning a process of, do we want to go that far, and what do we want to cover, and do we want to instate a similar, retainer account paid for by the applicants to cover inspections. That's all I have.
Okay.
Unless you have more to say about that.
No, thank you, Karina, for continuing to work on this. I'm a process person, so I like to know that things are covered by a process.
Next item is other business properly before the board. Planners report. Give it to Kate.
Do you want to do the meeting minutes first?
It's up to you.
Okay, that'll go fast.
Meeting minutes, approval of minutes, March 11th, 2019. Mr. Mills.
I make a motion we approve the meeting minutes from March 11th, 2019, as written.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
I abstain, sir.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Those are okay. Next, approval of meeting minutes, March 23rd, 2019. Mr. Mills.
I make a motion we approve the meeting minutes from March 23rd, 2019, as written. Oh, no, as amended. Sorry. I gave my amendments to Kate.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Those are approved. Is the next item the planners report?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Planners report.
Okay. First thing, I'm planning to take vacation from July 5th to July 14th. It's about a week. We do have a planning board meeting scheduled on the schedule for that. I'm hoping if Kate is not on vacation, she'll try and...
What day do we have them?
We have July 4th. Oh, it's July 8th.
Those meetings in July and August are flexible. So even though it's there, as we get closer, we'll see how.
Usually, I would be surprised if we meet on that day.
Okay, and also, knock on wood, I'm hoping to have an assistant as well by then who could cover that particular meeting. Okay. All right, I'm just going to go by this. The town clerk's office has asked that the planning board reiterate a document that outlines the site plan review committee and the people who are on that committee. The last one they had on record was from 2012, so in order to get their files updated, what I'll do is I'll read the document with the correct names in it, and then I'll, if the planning board is on board with it, I'll update this tomorrow and submit it to the town clerk. So this is for the town clerk, for the town of Southborough regarding the site plan review committee. And this will say, Dear Mr. Hegarty, in accordance with Chapter 174 from the Code of the Town of Southborough, Section 174-10B1, minor plan review is conducted by the Site Plan Review Committee. The current members of the committee are as follows. Karina Quinn, Town Planner. Laurie Lavoli, Building Commissioner. Karen Galligan, DPW Superintendent. Paul Pazinski, Board of Health Agent. Ken Paulhouse, Police Chief, Stephen Achilles, the new Fire Chief, designee of the Board of Selectmen, currently Mark Purple, Town Administrator. Asterisks on the Police Chief and the Fire Chief says, please note that the code allows the Police Chief and/or Fire Chief to designate a qualified representative to serve in his or her place. As we have discussed, meetings of the Site Plan Review Committee will be conducted in accordance with the Commonwealth's open meeting law as amended. Prior to conducting the committee's next meeting, each of the above members or designee must be sworn in by either Mr. Hegarty or Michelle Jenkins, Assistant Town Clerk. If you have any questions or need any additional information, please let me know. Sincerely, Karina Quinn, Town Planner, with copy to the Board of Selectmen, Mark Purple, Town Administrator, and members of the Site Plan Review Committee.
Questions, comments?
There's not a representative from the Concom on there?
They are invited to attend, but they're not a voting member of the committee. I will double check if it needs to be, but the bylaw I know says that they're invited to hear and to provide comment, but they're not a vote. Okay. Planners report still. So that's
Good to go.
good to go, okay. Conservation agent Melissa Danza has asked, she is applying for a municipal preparedness, vulnerability preparedness grant through the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, Energy and Environmental Affairs. And part of that application is asking that the various boards and committees provide a support letter for the application. And Melissa, the conservation agent, said she's currently seeking letters of support from applicable departments and boards and committees to become a municipal vulnerability preparedness community. Right now, the MVP planning grant is open for municipalities that would like to begin the process of planning for climate change resiliency and implementing priority projects. This grant would fund a vulnerability assessment of the town and develop action-oriented resiliency plans with the chance of extra funding to complete our local hazard mitigation plan. And also this ties into the master plan. There's topics of resiliency and climate change that are going to be addressed in that as well. So I prepared a draft support letter for the planning board to accept, and Dawn would sign, and it's in your packet, I believe. Did I put it in your packet? No, I didn't. I created this very quickly today. So if I can pass them out. It's a very brief letter. And it follows the samples that were provided from the town of Harvard, which also received grants in the past, I believe. And just note that the conservation agent has to submit their grant application next week. No, by the end of this week. So she's hoping to get this support from the planning board.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we support the effort for the town to apply for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? It says, understanding the town's vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities are if you have a lot of water bodies, streams, rivers, reservoirs that are impacted by floods or higher water or drought. That's one area of vulnerabilities. Also impacts native species, plants, wildlife, which are dependent on those resources.
Okay.
I'm open to comments on any revisions if something seems.
No, I just wanted a little clarity on the term vulnerabilities. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Do you have the original? Or can I sign any one of them? You tell me.
You can sign that one.
That's a good one.
Was that a 5-0?
5-0. Okay, next item on the agenda.
I had one thing, Corinne, I'd forward you some information on, I've been contacted by a professor at WPI to talk about the effects of blue light from the new LED lights. Thought we could have a discussion item for that.
Yes, I've put that on the agenda for the 29th, and I'm going to follow up with him to see if he's available. If he has a conflict, I'll push it to the May 13th meeting.
Okay. Just wanted to throw that out so everyone was ready.
Yep, got that.
So are those different than the ones on the police cars?
No, it's the effect of the actual blue light. You see it a lot on your telephone now. Well, maybe not yours, Mr. Chairman. But on the other phones, the effects of blue light at night that it has not only on humans, on their phones, but also on animals and insects. There's ways you can still have the LED light, but tone down the blue part that is affecting native species in the environment. So.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. Okay, public safety building. We recently, no, it's not the sign. It's, give me 1 second here. I know exactly what it is. In a butter on Lattisquama was, had a question regarding the public safety building's landscape screening along the back of the property. And I just want to see if I had it up here to show you. I do. Just get to the plan here. So if you recall, when the site plan was approved, along the back of the golf course parking that was proposed, there were 2 sections of retaining walls. And along the backs of those retaining walls, there were, I believe, arborvitaes or some kind of screening landscaping proposed. And it just so happens that where there was no retaining wall, there's a tulip tree proposed, but there was an open section that didn't have any screening. And that particular section happens to, if you're looking from Lattisquama back the property towards the new public safety building, which you can see there, will leave an open gap there to see the public safety building and the lights and whatever. So I suggested that the abutter contact the Public Safety Building Committee to determine how to remedy that and if additional landscaping would be an issue. And also spoke to the building commissioner because minor changes wouldn't have to come back before the planning board. So this is considered a minor change by the building commissioner, and the Public Building Safety Committee is looking into possibly addressing this gap in the landscape screening, which will benefit the people along Lattisquama in that section. So there's, since it's a minor change, it won't need to come back for site plan approval. So that's just an update. Any questions on that? Okay. Public safety building, the sign, they have preliminarily, they meaning the architect for the public safety building has begun to submit an application to the building department. They're going to come before the board for a planning board application for a sign, which requires the planning board to make a recommendation to zoning board. It's a public hearing process. So they're on the agenda for April 28th if they get their application package in. They have to deliver the hard copies.
Are we having that fall in the minor change as well, from our perspective? They're not gonna have to open up.
I believe the location is the same, so the sign is under the jurisdiction of the building department, but because the sign is larger, and I have a picture of it here for you.
I've seen it, and I appreciate your effort
Okay.
to keep after them about it. I think that sign is much more in
Context.
likeness
Mhm.
of what the rest of the town is using, and I think it would reflect well with
Here it is, okay.
the other town signs in the community.
That's not it. Sorry, I just can't see it. Here it is. All right. This represents a plan of the sign that's going to be submitted for.
Terry.
There it is. So that's a picture of the sign.
Yeah, and thank you again for keeping after them.
Oh, no problem. And the timing, I think, will work at the next planning board meeting, once they submit the application. I've already mentioned that the new fire chief, Stephen Achilles, is going to be starting shortly. And Vanessa Hale brought him around to the different departments and introduced him to us, so I had a chance to meet him. He's a very nice gentleman, and he's probably a really good add to the town for a public official. Very outgoing, open, and was willing to talk, and very personable. So, I had a potential person come in for 5 Greystone Way. He owns 2 lots there, and he was discussing whether he could do a common driveway for 3 homes there. And he had 2 approaches. He wants to put a solar panel up, and the solar panel has to be located where it's infringing on his other lot. So he's proposing to come forward with kind of a little bump out to change the lot through an A&R. And I suggested he could either go to zoning board and get a setback variance or do the A&R approach. And I told him I would mention it at tonight's meeting. I didn't have a chance to put this on the graphics. The problem is that I told him he'd have to explain some kind of hardship for, instead of coming right off the frontage for his driveway, why he needed to extend a 3rd common driveway off the 2 that already exist. And but I basically told him he would need to come for an A&R if he was taking that approach, and for a common driveway permit, because it's 3 homes off of a common driveway. So if anyone has any questions on that, if and when he actually submits, you'll have all the information. But I did tell him I'd bring it up. It's hard for you to opine or even give any feedback at all on something you haven't really seen, so I understand that. All right, and the last thing is Youth and Family Services. I just wanted to point out that they have unscheduled day on April 11th. Right here. There's your report.
That means we don't have to do our homework on the 11th.
And it's no meetings that evening. It's April 11th. You're supposed to unplug from your cell phones, from your TVs, get outside, etc. So that's that day. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have to bump our homework up to the 10th. You said by the end of the week you wanted.
We still have Friday.
Well, let's get our homework done earlier then.
Don't
This puts more pressure on you so that when you get to that unscheduled day,
And the last thing, I think, is, one last thing for Youth and Family Services is sponsoring a first annual Celebrate Wellness event on the evening of May 30th, where they will be awarding Lori Sugarman the Whittier Wellness Award. So I just wanted to put that out there, so the public could see, just be reminded. I'm not sure they always have the venue, so I'm trying to help them out so they can see that. And that's all I have.
we can see how the many paths of the town boards and actions wind up traveling through the planner's office. Any other questions, comments? Anybody from the public?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? We're adjourned.